I'm looking out a few years. This isn't now. So starting with where we want to get to, though, we've got to understand that the concept of waves and in particular surf pools, there's a lot of information and, I say, misinformation. That it's a matter of perception and understanding. So what I want to do is get into some of the details of how we break that apart and understand where we might use this forum to take the next step. Is this the button? There we go. Okay, so in surfing, the question is what's good? You have surfers, you know, what's good? Those competitions defined, for example, Kelly Slater, you know, so notably the best surfer in the world. And one preface, I guess, there is a clear distinction in the surfing tradition relative to the soul surfer and the competition surfer. And I think that in the context of surf pools, they're man-made. We're going, in this, my presentation today, it's one more of, let's call it the competition flood. So, good waves are subjective. If we say, well, what is a good wave? Oh, it's hollow, you know, it's just this real peaky. But what does that really mean? Is that something that we can break apart and really tell? So, what we want to do is try to level that playing field. How do we do it in other sports? So, if we look at, let's say, for example, you know, in NBA or in basketball in general, you have a very defined playing field. You know, even in international courts, different than what would be a collegiate court, different than the NBA, but they're still specific. Football, of course, you have very specific dimensions. You know, even when you get into baseball, it's even more. So, you know, I think that the concept I'm trying to bring up here is that we have to identify that there are these metrics that go into defining this playing field. And so what are the benefits of defining that? Well, for the riders, I mean, to the extent that you know where you stand in relation to someone else, I think in human nature, that's probably, you know, very, just a component of ourselves that people want to know. So that's why if you have a same wave over and over again, you can create that type of that metric, that understanding. You also have self-improvement. You've got repeatability by having something you can come back to. It's like Tony Hawk and how he got so good. You know, you have that accessibility where if you can do one, you know, at the ocean here, well, you can do one in Podunk, Iowa. And now all of a sudden you have that consistency, and that's where the riders are really going to be able to take off. From a surf park owner perspective, you have the level playing field that allows for, you know, promotion, training, clinics, you know, competition, demos. All of those are marketing hooks. They're perennial, you know, tools that allow you to then create the kind of the mechanisms to promote and tell a story to your customers and get the repeat business and justify the capital expenditure. You know, for purposes of you know, the pool is a sanctioned event. Well, then there's certain, let's call it a competitive advantage over what might be the traditional water park that has a wave pool down the road. From a surf pool manufacturer's perspective, you know, if we look at the benefits of why you'd want to create a metric and call it a standard, that it objectifies the wave manufacturing world. It'll allow, you know, third-party certifications. It would be the ability to minimize those false claims and have truth in advertising. So, and if we look at the media side of the equation on why we want to create those standards, you know, it's consistent, it's repeatable, you create a bigger market. You're looking at Brazil, you're looking at, you know, China. You have the same playing field, and now you can give a lot more consumers that then they'll be able to then justify that media sell and selling your sponsors and your commercials, your advertising. When you have a controlled environment, what I've found that, you know, when building the first flow riders and flow barrels, you create this unique place for better camera angles, you know, inside the waves. It's not, you know, you can. I'm sure you guys can all envision it, but just the photography, the media, that all of those type of capturing of imagery will be just phenomenal. And the ability to create entire motion picture studios with just, environments like this, you can do that. It's not going to be a big deal. For the federations themselves, you'll have better control over the rules and the standards, and you'll be able to increase the market by, events, because it's less expensive to produce those events. The things are going to be, it's already set up for you, so you don't have to cart everything down to the beach, and then, of course, you don't have the vagaries of Mother Nature, so that you just flip a switch and you'll be able to have these competitions, which will then allow for the federations to grow. So, next. What are the current standards? This was a specification for a project that was in Meadowlands for this American Dream Park. And, diamond, double wave, V in, V out. I mean, I didn't quite figure out how that really is. They have the height of the wave, but let's look at that issue of height. And so we break up these components, and I'll get into height here in a second. What are the elements that define the playing field? Well, and this is the wave component, so let's start in on this. So we have the size, the length, and these are just some, I just threw some down. The shoulder characteristics, the thickness of the lip, curl profile. So wave size, of course, in surfing, you got your Hawaiian size versus, you took a tape measure out there. This is right out in front of my house, this wind and sea. But look at this ride length. You have a nice takeoff, I think it'll repeat here. Nice little takeoff, 6-foot wave. But look at the quality of that ride. But you get a claim where they say, well, I want a 7-second or 10-second duration of my ride. Well, okay, you get it. But what you can do a focused wave, because that's what wind and sea is. It's where the wave is. You just get those south swells and it keeps in. But what's that quality of that left going to be? Is it going to be like a wind and sea? No, it's not that good. Well, I apologize to you guys. Okay, then we got the angle, the peel angle. That's where you have your crest line versus the breaker line. You can see the white portion there. And then you've got the differences, because the previous slide was about a 45-degree peel angle for more of an intermediate. This is a 30-degree peel angle more for advanced. You get a longer wall. Okay, then you have your shoulder characteristics, whether it's curving in, curving in at you, such that you've got something to hit, versus if it's curving away from you, then that's more, it's more beginner oriented. And you got your thickness of lip. We don't need to say much more than that. You got your curl profile. Trestles is a really nice way because it has a lot of characteristics that allow you to do a lot of things, but it's not that killer like the one before. Now let's talk about the system and the system components that relate to, let's call it wave pools and surf parks. Energy is number one, because to do a wave, I mean, if you think about a cubic foot of water, 64 pounds, and every time you lift that water above the datum, that's 64 pounds you got to lift. So when you see a wave and you're lifting up 100 feet long, 8 foot above the datum, that's a huge amount of energy. We're talking like megawatts of power to run it per hour. So then it gets into the issue from a system perspective of how you deal with the energy that you have, and whether you go in electrical versus natural gas versus variability of, you might have how are you going to book that? If they have a demand charge and you have the demand charge and you got to put all your nameplates of your motors down there, and then all of a sudden you got this massive cost every month and you're not even using the thing. That's because that's the way utilities, a lot of utilities work. So there's a number of elements that go into it, and the key metric, of course, is going to be your cost per wave. Then the pool itself, if you have so many joules of energy you put into the thing, well, what that can be easily theoretically confirmed in terms of what that wave height and that wave should be in terms of its theoretical, output. Likewise, though, when you go out and actually measure it, if it's less, well, then that was inefficiency. And we need to have a metric to determine that inefficiency, because that's energy wasted. Energy wasted doesn't do our culture any good. Okay, next is this, the system efficiency itself. Because let's say you go with electricity. Well, if electricity is generated off, on some power plant, then you have all your, what type of power was it? Was it coal? Was it, natural gas? Natural gas is cleaner. What were the line transmission losses? So I mean, you got to look at the whole picture to see how efficient it is, because the reality is, to build these surf parks, under the current energy state, it's very, I would say, very much a global warming influence, which is, it's not good. High CO2, it's going to have ramifications. And in addition to that, you're going to have NOx and you're going to have heat waste. So the key, one of the areas I've been really focusing on is that energy efficiency and that engine, that driver. Because that's the only way it's ever going to be viable to do these big pulls. Otherwise, we're kind of wasting our time. So, what do we do now? What do we want as a group if we're going to do this 10 years out? How do we level this playing field? So what I'd like to do is a call for action to initiate those interested, those who would have the interest, that we could have Surf Park Central and the Center for Surf Research, that we get together manufacturers, riders, park operators, we meet and we establish certain guidelines, similar to what they did for all the other federations or organizations where you create standards. And the objective ultimately would be able to have independent third-party consultants to be able to then qualify and sanction, certify a pool and say, yes, this meets the standards. Like for example, if the ISA had a standard for what they want for their competitions, or the ASP, yes, this pool meets it. And likewise, if there was efficiency and energy, call it metrics that we would then identify to make sure these things weren't just gas guzzlers and burning up the planet, then this could be certified as well. And other reasons why the certification is important is safety. I mean, when I first started doing flow girls and flow riders, I didn't really care that much about it, because I said, hey, sir, figure it out yourself. The problem is when we opened Durban, there was like an ambulance coming every day just carting people out to the hospital. It wasn't good. So I think that likewise, when you design these things, you've got to make mistakes. I mean, and that'll be another factor that goes into what I believe is the standardization process. Sports integrity, manufacturing integrity, and the creation of value. That's where, if you have these standards, then you have a framework, you have a bone structure to work off of. And from that, then that ability to create value for the riders, the park owners, the surf pool manufacturers, the federations, it'll all come together. So, open for questions. Oh, there we go.
Bill, I was just thinking, like the NBA has owners, and they have their teams that go from every city to every city. I think what you're saying is standardize the pool, have professional teams, and they can have like minor league and farm teams and things that could learn surfing at a standardized pool. So I'm asking if this is what you're thinking. That way, somebody wanted to build a park, they could be like Gene Autry owned the Angels for a while, and Walter O'Malley, and then they could have their own team that they would hire kids that were better surfers, and then they would have competitions in that fashion. And that would bring the whole world into wanting to see this on television. I think you're standardizing the industry in that way. There might be some people interested in forming a national surfing league, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the NFL alone is a $9.5 billion industry. So the key question is, well, can this nascent, starting point that we're having our first meeting here, is that a possibility? I don't know. It may be. And even if you can get, you know, a tenth the way there, it's going to be, you know, a huge ride for a lot of people. And I think to your point, yes, I think it's possible. How that evolves is just a function of what probably a lot of the politics and machinations that'll evolve out of organizations like this.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
Pete Delacat. So the Wave House has been around for a while, and now we're finally getting together as an industry to talk about the future of wave pools. What do you think has happened between the beginning of the Wave House and the Flowrider technology and now to really kind of bring it to a head? And what do you think we can do beyond now, in addition to the things you've mentioned, to really keep it moving in this progressive fashion?
With the Wave House kind of came out of a function of I built the flow barrel, but the thing was economically inviable. It was a loser. But I loved to ride it. So I wanted to create a venue where I could just screw around and play with it. So what I had to do then is make all these other revenue centers, like the bar and the restaurant and the retail and the sporting events, competition, concerts, things like that. And I think the exact same thing is what happens with where we're heading with surf pools. I think resorts, I think hotels, residential developments, it's particular with the residential. If you look at it as a common area amenity, that's what this is. And so you're going to be in a lot, where this might have a viable function is in mega developments. But you're talking hundreds of millions. Not the pool as a standalone. I think standalone pools are possible, theoretically. I think, though, they're far down the road. Yeah.
My name is Chad Nelson from the Surfrider Foundation, and we spent a lot of time talking about, small degradation in wave quality in natural waves. So the idea of setting up some metrics, and if it's driven by parts, at least from a wave quality standpoint, is something that we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out. It's not that easy to do, but we'd love to work on that because I think that would have a lot of value for the way we quantify and determine the quality of our natural waves as well as wave pools. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and it was interesting. A lot of the scientists, I mean, going to hydrodynamics, a lot of the definitions they don't really look at sometimes because then it's not important. Like as an example, that the shoulder curvature, where you got an inward curve or an outward or concave or convex. They don't really have terms for that because they don't look at it as that being something to them that's important. But for us, yeah, I mean it is. So I agree. I think that's all of those things. That's why it's so critical for this venue, for those people that have interest. Jess Ponting and Matt. Please contact them. Let them know you have interest in being on some type of panel. The way I would envision it would work would be like a quarterly meeting, put together some type of initial standards, put it out for public circulation. Then get reviews and comments. Come back, like a quarter later, make another output, and then have people comment. And then maybe a year from now, when we have the next event, we'd have a call it standard 1, V.1, and have that come out for people to comment on and possibly approve, and then we start, working with different stakeholders to see how it could benefit them and work from there.
Hey Tom, I want to ask you a question. You just made me think of something. Should I use the mic? Just from the scientific standpoint, it's kind of funny because we don't have. We all want waves that barrel and peel, and it's either peeling in the peel angle or it's barreling. We call it plunging as scientists. There is no term for a surfing wave in the literature. And so
what do they say, a conoidal or?
Yeah, there's solitons and solitary waves, but that's more breaking form. But the peeling, barreling nature, there isn't a term. And so I'm maybe not in the English language, so I'll just limit it to that. But what is your take on these surf parks integrating with universities to just enhance just our science and our knowledge of waves themselves? I mean, not just for surfing. I mean, the list is huge: energy and coastal processes and just everything. How do we bring it to the universities?
Well, I think that's a good point. Justin, by the way, he's very well educated. He's got a master's over at Florida Tech in waves. So, I think two that I know of that are the first. There's Jess, of course, with the you know, San Diego State University. And then over in Newquay, they have the university there. They're a little more technically focused on materials and I think the retail side of it a bit as well. I think that there's going to be phenomenal opportunity with the universities for purposes of any industry, and particularly now because a lot of the educational centers are trying to figure out how to tap into youth, how to get matriculation in order to get more admissions, to get money. I mean, that's how they live. So to the extent that we have something that people want, particularly the youth, then the sponsorships and the relationship between the education centers and us, it's just a perfect forum. And not only, you know, for science, for media, for, you know, commercial, retail, all of those elements. I think it's just a, you know, an incredible opportunity.
Yeah, so I'm Stuart, I'm from UC Santa Barbara, I'm a professor also. My question is about building nature back into, you know, what's been a discussion about industrial design of waves. And you're talking about metrics, which is great. One of the points that Glenn Henning brings up sometimes in his talks is about the uncertainty, right, which is a key component of enjoyment. It's not, he always uses the analogy of a basketball court, but you go sometimes the next day, or sometimes it's not, sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower. And that's part of, I think, the excitement of the experience of surfing. So when you're thinking you're a park designer, or a wave designer, have you thought through building that into wave design? So it's a fantastic element to which waves arrive.
Yeah, I think definitely we've thought about it. I think from a practical perspective, just trying to make it consistent is hard. So, but to your point, I think there's a couple aspects to your point. I think one of that uncertainty, the ability to create a software program which generates that is not a problem and can be done. You know, for example, you know, fast or slow takeoff goes into a quick section. You know, whether it closes out or doesn't close out, I mean, that's all programmed. Similar to a video game. The other side of it is from a perspective of repeatability. And I give this from my experience with Flowriders in the sheet wave world. When you have a consistent platform, it's what you bring to it. So that allows certain freedoms in a kind of bizarre way, where you think it would get boring, but then you get to try new things because you're trying to improve. And I think it's part of one's character, and that's what's so good about education. I've had parents come up to me with their kids telling me how it changed their lives, and I'm sitting there, oh, come on. But what it is, it's more of what those kids have been able to they're not verbal people. You know, a lot of humanity doesn't have their access to knowledge through what they say or what they read, but it's what they do. And to the extent that they can see how they can improve by doing something even as simple as surfing or flow riding, I think it brings that level of understanding of themselves, which makes their own self-realization. And I think that's really important, and that's the gift that we bring to a lot of people, and that's why surfing's so cool. So I think for that as an underlying purpose and endeavor for what this thing's about, I think that's really important. So thank you for your question.
Hi, Tom. Mark Holt. I'm working with Larry Berman right now, and we're working on a couple wave parks of our own. And our discussion was actually, is there a market yet for personal wave machines? I know that you've been working with a standing wave, and I know all of us would like to have a wave in our backyards. Is there a technology there that, not necessarily a large one, but something we can actually put in a pool? I know the zoning problem, and I know the sound problem is there too. But maybe in a zoned area of larger lots. Is that technology available?
For surfing?
For surfing, for personal surfing pools, or even industrial and maybe at Bolton, if they put a pool, again, you know, on a smaller scale.
The biggest problem is cost, and there's a number of reasons why that's, and it depends how you do it. I mean, I have certain thoughts of how one could make it less expensive, but the energy, it's just, the way Mother Nature with the sun, and that free energy, it's can't be repeated very easily. So to that end, the cost is what the limiting factor is. And also the forces, they're so phenomenal. I mean, it's just like Jamie Mazeman, and he'll be able to tell you a little later with his park when they did the original surf park down in Orlando. The forces tore that bottom up and just in the next few waves. So that means the structures have to be robust, which means the costs are extremely high. Those are the problems. And then, or you go with thick concrete, steel, and then it just keeps ramping up. And that's where you have not seen surf pools other than in a Disney, because they can amortize those costs over a water park. And Jeff Henry's out here somewhere, and Jeff's the king of water parks. He'll tell you in a heartbeat that everyone here is crazy. That's what he'll tell you. But with that said, I don't believe so. I think there's an opportunity, and there is an ability, but it's going to take a lot more technology and a lot more know-how to get there. A lot more guts. So we'll get there though. All right, I think I'm probably over my comments.
Other questions?
Hi, Tracy Axel, and this kind of goes back on the universities. I'm a recent graduate with my master's degree from Cal State Long Beach in kinesiology and exercise science and sport performance. And the greatest challenge as it is that valid and reliable and the quantification of the weight. And I'm curious, in your approach to the major sporting companies, when you're downsizing and creating that field for performance in that quantification, whether it's accelerometers and GPSs, and how do you view that to then quantify the sport, which then can then lead into the ASP and the judging criteria for then standardizing for then the Olympics as well?
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing a very kind of, around the corner perspective relative to actually the metrics being on the human, the body, if I understood your question correctly, and how that relates to then how you can relate to that wave. And I clearly believe that's more your line, but I see that dynamic and the ability for instruction and proper, let's say, how do you become another, Slater type of thing. It's pretty evident that that's probably the direction we're going. I think there's huge opportunity, especially with the training facilities, that'll occur in these environments for that to happen. Absolutely.
Right.